Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we don't just read the source material, we take a tactical shortcut to being well informed. Today, we are attempting to reverse engineer the ultimate mystery, the person sitting across from you. Our mission is to transform the complex art of reading people, understanding intentions, hidden thoughts, and true emotions, from a hazy intuition into something well structured, a learnable, valuable skill set. Forget the mystical superpowers. We're looking at the techniques used by seasoned psychologists, FBI agents, high stakes negotiators. We want to analyze character, predict behavior, and understand underlying intentions. And not just to feel superior, but to dramatically improve your communication and effectiveness in basically every interaction you have.
And we have to start by confronting the foundational challenge. Every person you encounter is fundamentally a black box. You're sealed off from their internal process. You simply cannot see their thoughts, their true feelings, or their long-term strategies. So the only currency we really deal in is external data. We have to rely entirely on observable signs, the specific words they use, the expressions on their face, their body movements, those subtle shifts in tone, even their appearance. The goal here is clarity, right? Not certainty. We aren't aiming to know the absolute truth about someone, but rather to construct the most accurate possible model we can. And we do that by gathering high-quality data points, multiple pieces of evidence that sort of cluster together. They form a coherent pattern. This deep dive is about understanding what those data points are and how to assemble them quickly.
Okay, let's unpack that foundational challenge because honestly, most people who think they're naturally good with people, well, they're often getting the basics fundamentally wrong. They fall victim to these immediate obstacles that completely cloud their perception. The first one, classic, frustrating trap. Confirmation bias. When you make an intuitive guess about someone, you only register and remember the 2 times you nailed their mood or intent.
Exactly.
But you conveniently forget the 20 times you were, miles off. This bias reinforces a belief in your intuition while starving you of actual corrective feedback. It feels good, but it's wrong.
And the second major failure point is neglecting context. A single data point, a datum, it means almost nothing in isolation. You see someone look up and to the left, does that mean they're constructing a lie?
Yeah.
Or were they just distracted by a noise or a light flashing? You have to situate your observation within the person's immediate environment and, crucially, their cultural background.
Oh, the cultural context is huge.
It's paramount. For example, in most Western cultures, holding eye contact signals honesty, confidence, attention. You know the drill. But in many East Asian cultures, Japan for instance, that same prolonged, direct eye contact, it can be seen as disrespectful, aggressive, even challenging authority.
So if you miss that cultural piece,
You'll falsely label an entire population as shifty or deceptive, just based on your own cultural norms, your own baggage, really.
that leads right into the third mistake, focusing on just one single sign. You simply cannot see someone with their arms crossed and declare, aha, hostile, closed off.
Right. They might just be cold.
Exactly. Or maybe they hurt their shoulder. Or maybe that's just how they sit comfortably. We have to train ourselves to look for broader trends, for clusters of behavior, things that repeat and match up.
But here's the thing. Before you can accurately read them, you absolutely have to address the biggest blind spot in this whole operation. You. This is the crucial starting point for any kind of objectivity. If you're unaware of your own emotional state right now, your recent fears, if you're rushing, what assumptions you hold about their background or social class, your observations, they'll often teach you more about your internal biases than about the person in front of you.
That makes sense. So if you just got chewed out in a meeting.
Exactly. If you were just lied to, you might walk into the next conversation basically looking for deceit. You'll perceive every innocent gesture as proof of treachery. We call this baggage. If you don't check your own baggage at the door, your readings are they're just self-talk, really.
And that inability to stay self-aware and objective, it explains why people can leave the exact same conversation with totally different ideas about what happened or what the mood was. We rely way too much on the words. We often quote that FECA statistic, right? Communication is only, 7% actual spoken words?
That's the one. And a substantial 38% comes from the tone of voice, the inflection, speed, volume, but a massive 55%. That's all body language and facial expressions.
Right.
So if you're not actively reading that 93% nonverbal layer, your interpretation isn't just flawed, it's almost certainly wrong. You're missing the vast majority of the message.
Okay, so 93% is nonverbal. How good are we, generally, at picking up on that signal? The research, interestingly, it confirms this is a measurable skill, and therefore trainable.
It absolutely is. Psychologists, notably Simon Baron-Cohen, developed a social intelligence test, the Eyes and the Mind test. Participants have to figure out complex emotions just by looking at pictures of people's eyes. And the results are pretty telling. The average score, only around 26 out of 36.
Wow.
Yeah, that means on average, a typical person misinterprets emotions in roughly a quarter of their daily social encounters. So if you can shift from just relying on gut feeling to using structured models and accurate data collection like we're talking about today, you can demonstrably improve that score. It's a skill you can build.
All right, so to really get effective at analysis and prediction, we have to move past just recording what people do. We need to dig into why they're doing it. If we understand the cause, the underlying driver, we can start to predict the outcome. Every behavior, unless it's, genuine pathology, is driven by some motivation. Desire, fear, habit, chasing pleasure, avoiding pain. There's always a why.
And we should probably start with the most profound, often invisible drives, the ones buried deep in the unconscious. These are concepts like the Jungian shadow and the inner child. Carl Jung defined the shadow as basically all those parts of our nature we've disowned. The bits we find petty, shameful, weak, or full of rage. The stuff we hide from others and even from ourselves. Behavior is frequently an unconscious expression of this repressed stuff trying to find an outlet.
We see this a lot in compensation, right? The person who's overly loud, demanding attention, maybe compensating for a deep feeling of insignificance. The classic example, maybe a bit cliche, is the person buying that crazy expensive sports car. It's not about need. It's often a desperate attempt to compensate for lost youth or vitality. The sadness of aging gets pushed into the shadow.
And it pops up externally as this flashy attempt to reclaim a feeling of power or youth. It's driven by what we call the polarity principle. Constantly suppressing these shadow aspects takes a huge amount of psychic energy, like holding a beach ball underwater. Eventually, that repressed material, the need for freedom or self-expression or just letting loose, it pops up, often uncontrollably.
That explains things like the super disciplined, perfect student who goes completely wild their first year away from home.
Exactly. The suppressed need for rebellion or whatever it was eventually demands expression. It finds a way out.
And what's really fascinating and useful is how we deal with our own shadow. The easiest way to relieve the discomfort, project it onto someone else, attribute those unwanted traits to them.
That's shadow projection. It's an unconscious way to feel better by basically saying, see, they're the lazy one, not me. Think of that colleague who's always calling everyone else stupid or criticizing minimal effort. They're almost certainly projecting their own deep fears about their own intelligence or maybe their own past laziness onto others.
So the tactical insight here is pretty powerful.
It's crucial. When someone throws a really harsh, defining insult at you, especially if it feels way over the top, disproportionate the content of that insult often reveals a core shame or fear of theirs. If you realize they're projecting their insecurity onto you, their insult loses its personal sting. Instead, it becomes this genuine, though unwanted, insight into their own vulnerabilities.
Okay, alongside the shadow, we also have to recognize the influence of the inner child. This is behavior rooted in that unconscious part of us that remembers being a kid, carrying old wounds, fears, learned ways of getting needs met.
Right. And you're dealing with the inner child when someone displays really disproportionate emotion, a complete shutdown, an explosion of anger, extreme defensiveness, stuff that feels totally immature for the current adult situation.
It feels like you're suddenly dealing with a 5-year-old in an adult body.
Precisely. And the inner child is a powerful manipulator. Its emergence often forces you into a specific role. If you find yourself automatically soothing or scolding or taking way too much responsibility for a grown adult, whether they're pouting, sulking, having a tantrum, you're likely being pushed into the parent role by their inner child.
So recognizing that pattern is key to breaking it.
Absolutely. The moment you recognize it, you can consciously choose not to play the parent, engage with their adult, responsible side instead, refuse to feed that dynamic.
Yeah.
Often, that alone disrupts the pattern and forces them to re-engage more maturely.
Okay, moving from that deep psychological stuff to more primal drivers. Freud's pleasure principle. Seeking pleasure and maybe even more importantly, avoiding pain. These are the common, universal motivations for everyone.
That's the core idea. And these drives operate according to 4 governing rules that make people surprisingly predictable, actually. Rule number 1. The absolute golden rule of motivation. The drive to avoid pain is way stronger than the motivation to gain pleasure. Think about it in business. A company is far more likely to throw massive resources at avoiding a huge lawsuit or market collapse that's pain avoidance than they are to chase a new product that only promises a moderate, maybe distant profit that's pleasure gain.
Survival first. Avoid the immediate threat.
Exactly. Pain avoidance provides immediate, overwhelming motivation. We're hardwired for it.
Okay, rule 2 is often overlooked. Perceptions of pleasure and pain are more powerful drivers than the actual things themselves.
Spot on. We act on what we believe will happen, not always what is objectively true. Someone might avoid a great career path because they perceive the stress is too painful, even if they have no real evidence, and the potential upside is huge. The idea of the pain dictates the behavior.
And rule 3 ties into that immediacy bias. We focus on the now much more than distant consequences.
Right. The desire for immediate gratification or immediate pain relief just overrules distant reality. Think retail therapy. Feels good now, even if it means crippling debt later. The immediate relief is a stronger driver than the abstract future pain.
And finally, rule 4. Emotion beats logic. Every single time.
Pretty much. People know logically that smoking is dangerous or eating badly causes health problems, or they need to have that tough conversation with their boss. But the illogical, emotional craving for the cigarette, the comfort food, the urge for instant relief, that often wins out over rational thought. So to predict behavior, you constantly have to ask, what good thing are they seeking emotionally, or what bad thing are they trying to avoid emotionally?
We can connect these primal drives to a broader framework using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid model. It's powerful because it shows how motivation shifts based on which needs are currently unmet. You can't really motivate someone effectively on one level if they're struggling to meet needs on a lower level.
Exactly. Maslow laid out 5 stages. At the base, physiological needs: food, water, warmth, rest, basic survival. Once those are reasonably met, people move to safety needs: security, stability, freedom from fear. Think steady income, safe environment. After that, it's love and belonging, relationships, community, friendship, feeling connected.
And only when those 3 foundational levels are pretty secure can people really focus energy on stage 4. Self-esteem. This involves self-acceptance, achievement, gaining respect.
Right. And finally, at the very top, self-actualization. Living for a higher purpose, creativity, morality, accepting reality as it is.
The practical application here is immediate. Let's go back to that counselor in a women's shelter example. When a client first arrives, she's probably operating at the physiological and safety levels.
Absolutely. So the counselor must prioritize finding stable housing, getting medical care, establishing routines. It would be totally useless, even harmful, to try and motivate her by talking about forgiving her past or finding her life's purpose at that point.
Her needs are much more fundamental.
Right. If she's stuck at safety, the communication has to be about stability. Routines, consistency, clear rules. If she's been there a while and feels safe, maybe she shifts to belonging. Then the support pivots, integrating her into group activities, building trust, finding community. Only when she's stable and has support can she really start focusing on self-esteem, maybe job training, setting goals, building confidence. Motivation has to track the lowest unmet need.
Okay, and finally, there's another huge motivator, especially when things get tough: defending the ego. The source material calls the ego a giant armored porcupine, highly motivated to protect itself from failure, shame, contradiction.
Yeah, that's a good image. This drive leads to profound self-deception, even intellectual dishonesty. The ego needs to maintain internal consistency even if reality totally contradicts it. Think of the executive whose whole career was built on one big strategic decision. 10 years later, all the evidence shows the decision is sinking the company. Can he admit it?
Usually not. His identity is too wrapped up in it.
Exactly. His ego can't handle the blow of realizing his life's work might have been flawed. So, to protect that identity, he intellectually denies the evidence, doubles down on the failing plan. It's a painful defense mechanism bending reality.
And these defense mechanisms are specific strategies the unconscious uses, like denial, the most basic. Just claiming the bad thing doesn't exist. The injured athlete insisting, "I'm fine, coach, put me back in."
Then there's rationalization, making excuses. The sour grapes thing. You don't get the promotion, so you say, well, I didn't really want it anyway. The team's biased. The hours are too long. You shift blame externally to avoid feeling inadequate.
Displacement, we see this everywhere, especially at work. You're angry at your boss, but you can't yell at them.
Right, too risky.
So you go back to your desk and snap at a junior colleague over something tiny. The anger is real. The target is safer. You kick the dog, metaphorically.
And we circle back to projection. a more complex denial.
Hmm.
The person secretly cheating feels ashamed, so they project that suspicion onto their partner, accusing them of being secretive or unfaithful. Understanding these defenses gives you real insight into someone's hidden vulnerabilities that paint your truths they're trying desperately not to face.
Okay, so we've dug into the why, the motivations, the ego, the needs. Now we shift to the what and the how, the observable cues. The big idea here is nonverbal primacy. As Joe Navarro says, the body always speaks the truth, even if the words are lies. We're communicating constantly, even when we're still.
And we start with the face. It's the most expressive canvas and the fastest. We're looking for micro-expressions, first studied by Haggard and Isaacs, then deeply categorized by Paul Ekman. These are spontaneous, involuntary muscle contractions. Sometimes they flash across the face in like 1/30th of a second, super fast.
And then unlike those big, obvious expressions like a fake smile, these are incredibly hard to fake. They often indicate hidden or rapidly changing emotions.
That's the key. If we can train our eyes to spot these tiny, fleeting muscle movements, we get a glimpse into the honest emotional core. Ekman identified 6 universal emotions visible across all cultures. Knowing the specific muscle movements is how you tell them apart.
Let's break those down.
Okay. Genuine happiness, the Duchenne smile, isn't just the mouth corners turning up. It crucially involves the muscles around the eyes, the orbicularis oculi. You get those little crinkles at the corners. A forced, polite Pan Am smile, usually just the mouth. Sadness often shows up with the inner corners of the eyebrows pulling up into a kind of triangle shape. Plus, maybe a slight droop at the outer corners of the eyes and lips.
Anger is about tension and contraction. Lowered eyebrows, pulled together sharply, eyes might narrow or glare, lips pressed tight. It's like the face is bracing for impact.
Now, fear and surprise get confused a lot, but the muscles tell the story. Fear is high tension. Upper and lower eyelids lift and tense. Eyebrows raise and pull together, making the forehead tense. Mouth might open, but it's tense, lips pulled back. Surprise, on the other hand, is non-tense. Eyebrows go up, but they're rounded, not pinched. Eyes wide open, but relaxed. Jaw might even hang loose. Surprise is passive intake. Fear is active threat assessment.
Okay, the practical challenge, though. How does someone actually spot 130th of a second flash when they're also trying to listen and think about what to say next?
That's a totally fair question. First, you got to slow down the conversation internally, stop mentally rehearsing your reply, and dedicate focus just to observation for moments. Second, train your eye to focus mainly on the eye area and the forehead. Micro-expressions there, especially the eyebrows and eyelids, are often the most reliable and maybe a bit easier to catch than quick lip movements. Third, look for asymmetry. Real, spontaneous emotions tend to engage both sides of the face fairly equally. If you see tension flash only on one side, or half smile, that's often a sign of a forced or faked emotion.
Got it. Okay, moving from the face to the whole body, body talk. Joe Navarro calls the body a billboard, advertising our true state. And it comes from the limbic brain, the emotional, ancient part.
That's why the body's immediate reactions are often the honest ones. They happen before conscious thought can filter them. Our bodies are still running that old survival software. So even in modern, non-physical threats, a tough negotiation, an aggressive interview, our bodies still default to those primal fight, flight, or freeze responses.
Can you give some examples of how those look in, say, an office meeting?
Sure. The freeze response is often fixation. Someone might lock their legs tightly around their chair legs or press their feet flat and totally still on the floor, almost like they're trying to become invisible by being rigid. The flight response shows up in angling. Their torso, maybe their feet, might subtly point towards the door, even while they're looking right at you. They might put a barrier, a laptop, a water bottle on their lap, unconsciously blocking. And the fight response. That can be invading your space, leaning way forward, using aggressive hand gestures, maybe just becoming argumentative, picking fights over small things.
And when people feel stressed or anxious, they do those self-soothing things too, right? Pacifying behaviors.
Exactly. Unconscious attempts to calm the nervous system down. Rubbing the neck is super common. The neck's vulnerable, has the carotid artery. Stroking it is like a mini self-hug, signaling discomfort or insecurity.
And women might fiddle with a necklace or touch that little dip between the collarbones, the suprasternal notch. Same idea, signaling vulnerability or anxiety. These aren't just random habits.
Not at all. Other key ones. Rubbing the forehead or temples, like trying to soothe overwhelmed thoughts. Rubbing or licking lips when anxiety dries the mouth out. And one people miss. Leg cleansing. Wiping hands down the thighs under the table, like trying to physically wipe away the stress.
What about pulling at a collar or tossing hair back?
That's ventilating. Trying to cool down that internal heat from tension or stress, it's another sign someone's feeling pressure.
Posture tells a huge story, too, about confidence versus feeling threatened.
Absolutely. When threatened, bodies tend to contract. Arms crossed, legs crossed, creating barriers. When confident, bodies expand. We see wider gestures taking up more space, classic confidence poses, hands on hips, arms akimbo, or that hand steepling, fingertips touching.
Ah, yes, the steeple. Signals control, certainty.
It signals internal certainty and poise. Yeah. Often used when someone feels they have the upper hand or are very sure of their point, and never, ever overlook the legs and feet. Arguably the most honest part of the body because we're least conscious of them. Feet generally point where the person unconsciously wants to go. So if someone's saying, yeah, great presentation, loved it, but their feet are aimed at the door, their unconscious mind is screaming, get me out of here.
Versus happy feet, jiggling legs.
That can signal excitement or maybe nervous energy, but it's usually engagement, not boredom or a desire to leave.
Yeah.
Always context, though.
And we have to remember the body's an integrated system. The voice is body language, too.
Totally. Research shows people can actually hear subtle shifts in posture or even hand gestures just through changes in voice pitch, volume, rhythm. Anxiety tightens chest and throat muscles. The voice gets higher, tighter. You're literally hearing the body's tension. This holistic view brings us back to the most critical rule: message clusters. Never, ever rely on a single sign, like just crossed arms. You need to look at the unified message at least, say 3 signals pointing the same way. If you suspect deception, look for a cluster. Maybe tension signs, tight jaw, closed posture, plus distraction, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, plus vocal changes, higher pitch, more pauses, maybe more ums and eas. That cluster points towards anxiety and internal conflict.
So to read accurately, we need guiding principles, 3 core ones.
Yes. First, establish a person's normal behavior, their baseline. If someone always fidgets or clears their throat, ignore it. It's just noise for them. Second, look for incongruent behavior, the mismatch. This is vital. Verbal claim versus nonverbal reality, the classic. Someone wringing their hands, rubbing temples, sighing, while insisting through gritted teeth, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. The body screams louder than the words.
And third,
Watch for mirroring, or the lack of it. We instinctively mimic the posture, gestures, even speech rate of people we like or agree with. It builds rapport. If you're open, leaning in, engaged, but the other person stays closed off, stiff, leaning back, they're not mirroring, that's a powerful nonverbal sign of disagreement, hostility, or just deep disinterest. Rapport is broken and you need to change something.
Okay, so we've got the immediate cues, the nonverbals. But we can gain even more strategic power by using personality science as a kind of structural model. Things like the Big Five or Keirsey temperament, they aren't rigid boxes to stuff people into, right? More like useful framework scales to help categorize and make sense of all that behavioral data we're observing. Turns chaos into something more predictable.
It's exactly. The Big Five model, Ocean, gives us 5 major, pretty stable personality traits. These are thought to be relatively consistent across a person's lifetime. So OCEAN, we have 1, openness to experience, imaginative, curious, artistic versus more cautious, conventional. High openness often links to leadership in dynamic fields. 2, conscientiousness. This is about focus, discipline, planning. High C people are organized, reliable. It's linked to impulse control, longer life, career success. Very important trait. 3, extroversion, where you get your energy from being around people or from solitude and reflection. 4, agreeableness, how cooperative, kind, sympathetic you are versus more challenging, skeptical, self-focused. 5, neuroticism, emotional stability versus tendency towards anxiety, insecurity, rapid mood shifts.
Knowing these traits provides immediate context for interpreting body language.
Right.
Let's take that business partner scenario again. You're told this key partner is extremely blunt, low agreeableness, but also very high in conscientiousness.
Right. So in the meeting, you propose a controversial idea. The partner immediately crosses their arms, frowns deeply, looks skeptical.
The naive reaction is panic. They hate it. Deals off.
Exactly. But you, knowing their profile, can interpret that stern body language differently. It's not personal dislike. It's likely their high conscientiousness brain engaging in intense critical assessment. That's just how they process difficult information. It's business as usual for them, not rejection. Allows you to stay calm and proceed.
We can refine this even more with things like the MBTI dichotomies and Keirsey temperaments. MBTI looks at those 4 pairs: extroversion, introversion, energy, sensing, intuition, how you perceive facts versus patterns, thinking, feeling, how you process logic versus values, and judging, perceiving, how you implement order versus flexibility.
And Keirsey grouped these into 4 main temperaments. These are tactical gold for communication strategy. You've got Guardians, SJ. Focus on logistics, rules, duty. They seek security, want to know the established process. Artisans, SP. Adaptable tactical troubleshooters, seek stimulation, immediate results. Want to know if it works now. Idealists, NFV. Compassionate, diplomatic, ethical, seek meaning, identity. Want to know why it matters, the bigger picture, the values involved. Rationals, NT. Strategic, logical, competent, seek mastery, understanding. Want the data, the strategy, the objective analysis.
So if you're confronting, say, an idealist colleague about a performance issue, hammering them with rules like a guardian would want probably won't work well.
Likely not. You wouldn't appeal to strict rules or just bottom-line result. You'd appeal to their core drive for meaning. Talk about the team's purpose, how their actions impact the project's integrity, how they can live up to their own high standards. You tailor the whole message to their temperamental driver.
Okay, now let's shift gears to something high stakes. Lie detection. You need to be careful here, stick to the data, and start by acknowledging the truth. The accuracy rate for passive lie detection, it's pretty dismal.
It really is. Studies show even trained pros, cops, judges, security folks often do no better than chance if they're just watching for tells.
Right. So static observation alone isn't the answer. The goal isn't just spotting a twitch, it's about strategically engaging the person, making it a dynamic interaction designed to make them reveal the truth through their own mistakes.
The most effective baseline strategy, used a lot in investigative interviews, is open-ended questions. Let them talk freely, establish their narrative, and crucially, withhold information you already know.
That's the tactical key, isn't it? Let's say you suspect a client lied about traffic making them late. For a fact they were actually at the golf course.
Right. You don't immediately say, aha, I know you were golfing. No, you let them tell their story about the terrible construction and the unexpected detour. You let them commit.
Because once they commit to the lie,
They have to maintain it. And the more details they add to the fake story, the more chances they have to slip up, contradict themselves, especially if you have questions they didn't anticipate.
the ultimate tactic here seems to be increasing cognitive load. Lying is hard work for the brain.
It really is. The brain has to juggle multiple tasks. Construct the lie, suppress the truth, check the fake story for consistency, and monitor their own nonverbals and watch your reaction. It's exhausting. So we strategically increase that mental burden to force a fumble or a leak.
How do we actively do that? Increase the load.
First, drill down for specifics. Ask complex or unexpected questions. A rehearsed liar knows the main plot points. They probably haven't prepared an answer for what color was the shirt of the person standing next to you at that fictional bus stop, or describe the texture of the carpet in the room you supposedly waited in.
Asking for pointless details forces them to invent on the fly.
Exactly. Real-time fabrication is highly demanding. Second, ask them to tell the story in reverse chronological order. This is a classic technique. Telling a true story backwards is awkward, but usually possible. Telling a lie backwards, extremely difficult without major errors or long telling pauses. The rehearsed script is usually linear. Third, establish a baseline first with a true story. Ask them to recount a complex but verifiable event from their past. Watch their natural rhythm, gestures, emotional tone while they're telling the truth. Then you have a genuine comparison point when they shift to the potential lie.
Makes sense. And fourth?
Ask directly about the emotions they supposedly felt. Liars often rehearse the actions and details, but they neglect to plan the emotional response. A question like, how did you feel when you realized you'd missed the deadline, can trip them up. They might give a delayed answer or sound detached, unconvincing. The cognitive load of lying interferes with genuine emotional expression. The story might sound strangely objective or cold when it should have feeling. That's a big cue.
And when that cognitive load gets high, the physical signs start leaking out.
Yes. Watch for signs of high arousal. Increased blinking rate, maybe pupils dilate, speech gets messy stuttering, more throat clearing, more lums and us. And look for those pacifying behaviors we talked about, suddenly rubbing their neck, adjusting clothes, trying to manage that intense internal pressure.
Finally, we need to integrate the power of thin slicing, making surprisingly accurate snap judgments based on minimal data. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about this, citing studies like John Gottman's work.
Right. Gottman predicting divorce with, 95% accuracy after watching couples for just a few minutes. It shows our unconscious minds are powerful pattern detectors. We can train ourselves to use this speed consciously through specific observation tactics.
Like analyzing word choice.
Definitely. Listen to language patterns. Pronoun usage is a big one. Honest people tend to use more personal pronouns I, my, me, because they're centered in the real experience. Liars often use more distancing language, fewer I's, more we, they, vague terms, unconsciously trying to detach from the lie. Also, listen for how they assign cause and effect. Do they say, his feelings got hurt, or do they say, I hurt his feelings? The second shows ownership, accountability.
Then there's the Sherlock Holmes approach, reading appearance, possessions, their environment like a crime scene.
A person's home, their office, it's an extension of their self-concept. Look for what's there, but also what's missing. A super bare, obsessively clean house might signal a huge need for control, or maybe deep insecurity. Sam Gosling's research on bedrooms found conservatives often had orderly, neat spaces, while liberals tended towards more colorful, maybe messier rooms, often filled with books, music, travel stuff. It reflects values.
Clothing, grooming, accessories too. Are they chosen meticulously to send a status message or purely functional? Even a handshake gives data.
Yeah, studies link a firm handshake to higher extroversion and conscientiousness. That's data you get in the first 3 seconds. Analyze the details they choose to present, and just as importantly, the details they seem to neglect or hide.
Okay, we've covered observation, nonverbals, personality models, even lie detection strategies. Now we shift from passive observation and dynamic interaction into something more proactive, active elicitation. Instead of asking those surface questions like, so what are your values, which usually get you platitudes, we use targeted, indirect questions, questions designed to get concrete data about their real internal world, their actual motivations.
These questions are powerful because they tend to bypass the ego's usual defenses. They tap into genuine drivers. We've got 4 key indirect questions here that link right back to the pleasure-pain principle and Maslow's hierarchy.
All right, number 1, what kind of prize would you work hardest for, and what punishment would you work hardest to avoid?
This cuts right through the noise. Someone might say they want to raise the prize, but if they answer that the punishment they'd work hardest to avoid is being publicly embarrassed or criticized.
Then you know their real driver is avoiding shame, ego defense.
Exactly. It tells you their true priority isn't necessarily the gain, but avoiding that specific pain. Huge insight into their core motivation.
Number 2, where do you want to spend money, and where are you okay with skimping or skipping altogether?
Where money and effort flow, values follow. Someone who insists on flying first class, splurging on comfort, status, but drives a beat-up old car, skimping on utility. Maybe safety reveals a high value on immediate status perception. Conversely, the person who buys top-of-the-line safety gear but wears old clothes, they likely value security, safety needs, and function over public image, self-esteem needs. It shows priorities.
Number 3, what is your most personally significant achievement and your most meaningful disappointment or failure?
This is a direct line into their self-identity. The achievement shows what positive traits they value most in themselves. Resilience, creativity, whatever it is. The failure, that reveals the flaws they despise or fear most in themselves, maybe disorganization, perceived weakness, lack of follow-through. The story they tell around these 2 points is essentially the story of who they believe they are deep down.
And number 4, what task or activity is effortless for you and what is always exhausting?
This gets at genuine enjoyment versus deep dislike, often regardless of competence. Something effortless might not just be raw talent. It could be an activity that perfectly aligns with their psychological needs, making it feel easy, reducing mental friction, like an idealist finding diplomacy effortless, and something that's always exhausting, even if they're good at it. That signals a profound internal resistance, a distaste, gives you insight into where they face hidden struggles or drains on their energy in work or life. #outtag_outro. So to wrap up this entire deep dive, the foundation for reading people effectively is rigorous context and radical self-awareness. You have to know yourself first. Behavior. It's driven by deep motivations, the shadow, ego defenses, the hierarchy of needs. Our interpretation relies on gathering reliable clusters of physical cues from those split-second microexpressions to broader body language like pacifying gestures. Strategic reading uses frameworks like the Big Five or Keirsey temperaments as helpful models, and it uses active conversation strategies like increasing cognitive load during potential deception and using those clever indirect questions to get at true values. Mastering this skill, it fundamentally enhances your empathy, sharpens negotiation, improves communication across the board, and honestly provides some robust self-protection in interactions.
Which brings us to our final provocative challenge for you. Something to think about and maybe even apply immediately out there in the real world. If you now know that the insults someone throws at you often reveal their own disowned traits, that's shadow projection, and you know that avoiding pain is a much stronger motivator for most people than gaining pleasure. What is the single most strategically effective way to compliment a difficult or abrasive colleague the next time you encounter them? Think about how you might frame it. We'll leave you with that. See you next time on The Deep Dive.